In the Ashes of Memory game, Norton Campbell is a participant. He joined the competition after Frederick's disappearance. This timing suggests that Norton may have been brought in to replace Frederick. Consequently, many fans speculate that Frederick was eliminated from the game early on. However, this is not officially confirmed and remains a topic of considerable debate. Today, we will examine the character of Norton Campbell, also known as the Prospector, and associated with Fool's Gold. We will explore his background and story as it existed before the events of the game.
If the father is a miner, so shall the son.
If you want it, come and get it.
I once thought the same.
Kind child, please, not abandon me. No! Damn it! You hypocrite!
Poverty is the worst curse. But sometimes there are ways to make a change.
There are different ideas about where Norton, also known as Fool's Gold, comes from. Many believe he is from Scotland, mainly because of his last name, Campbell, which has Scottish origins. The name itself comes from Scottish Gaelic, with cam meaning crooked and beal meaning mouth. This suggests a strong connection to Scotland right from the start. Another reason people think Norton might be Scottish is because of the mining connection. Scotland has a long history of mining, and his backstory involves a mine collapse. Some believe this was inspired by the Blantyre mining disaster that happened in 1877, one of Scotland's most tragic mining accidents. This event could have influenced Norton's story, making Scotland a likely origin for him. However, not everyone agrees with this theory. Some believe he could be from Mexico, mainly because his story shares similarities with a book called The Transition of Juan Romero, which took place in Mexico rather than the UK. This book also involves a mine named the Norton Mine, making the connection interesting. Others suggest he might have North or South American origins. His strong desire for gold is often associated with North America, where the gold rush took place. Meanwhile, some players believe his dance emote resembles traditional South American dances, hinting at a possible connection there as well. One of the more unexpected theories comes from a detail in his sixth letter, where a currency called the para is mentioned. Para was a currency which was used mainly in the Ottoman Empire and the Eastern Europe in general. It's unclear if this means Norton himself has ties to the Ottoman Empire, or if it's connected to Benny, the elderly man he visits in the hospice. Benny was also a friend of Norton's late father, so his story might hold more clues about Norton's origins. In the end, there is no definite answer about where Norton comes from. The clues point in different directions, and until more information is revealed, his true origins remain a mystery. Norton was said to be 28 years old, meaning he was likely born in 1874. This is based on the fact that Ashes of Memory happened in July 1902, and his birthday is on March 19th. There's not much information about his mother, as Norton's story starts with him living alone with his father, who worked as a coal miner. Their life was extremely difficult, as miners were among the lowest paid workers in Victorian society. Their wages were often too low to afford a decent life, and the job itself was incredibly dangerous. Miners constantly faced life-threatening accidents like mine collapses, flooding, fires, and even falling from lifts that transported them in and out of the mines. Norton once mentioned in an event that he was used to being in deadly situations, which makes sense given his background. Even if a miner managed to avoid accidents, there was still the risk of deadly lung diseases, such as black lung, caused by inhaling coal dust over time, in which Norton himself was implied to have been suffered from. Sadly, mining companies didn't care much about their workers' health or safety, and even if a miner was injured or died on the job, the compensation was often very little. Most miners lived in small, overcrowded settlements or workhouses provided by the mining company. These places were dark, damp, and lacked proper sanitation, leading to all sorts of health issues. Norton's fourth letter describes these living conditions. As a friend of his father's, Benny talks about wanting to mine gold so they could escape poverty. It is said that Norton's house didn't even have glass windows, and that he barely had proper clothing or decent food. Norton's life became even more difficult when his father passed away from black lung. Based on his second letter, it seems Norton lost his father when he was very young, possibly as early as 8 years old. This deduction came from the fact that Norton was 28 during the event of the game, and he had worked in the mine for 20 years, thus making the timeline fit. According to his third letter, Norton lacked any formal education. This was a relatively common situation during the Victorian era, particularly for children who worked in mines, often starting as young as 6 years old. Additionally, basic schooling in the UK required payment at the time, making it difficult for individuals like Norton, or those from impoverished backgrounds, to attend. Furthermore, Victorian society generally accepted child labor as a standard aspect of working life. However, it is evident that Norton possesses the ability to read, and likely to write as well. This was not a common skill among miners, as many individuals in that profession during that period grew up illiterate. Examining his ivory tower skin description reveals that he attended the Deanery Academy through self-study. It is plausible that Norton also engaged in self-education during his time working in the mine. This suggests that Norton is a diligent individual, driven by a strong desire to escape poverty, which is something important in his lore altogether. After losing his father, Norton had no choice but to follow in his footsteps and become a miner himself. It was likely the only way he could survive. Working in the mines from such a young age made him tough, but it also meant he had to endure a lot. His second letter describes how he was ridiculed and looked down upon, yet he pushed through all of it just to survive and eventually find a way out of the coal mines. He worked long hours, stayed late, and even forced himself to be polite to his overseers in hopes of getting better opportunities elsewhere. Norton's struggles didn't end there. The 2023 Valentine's event revealed that he had to work 3 different jobs just to survive, yet he still couldn't afford a decent life. He ate simple, burnt bread for meals and had no holidays, because to him, holidays only meant more dishes to wash at the bar where he worked at night. During the day, he was a miner, and while his third job isn't clearly stated, it's possible he volunteered at a hospice, as there are hints about this in his letters. Despite all the hardships, Norton refused to accept his fate. He knew that if he continued working as a miner, he would be stuck in poverty forever, so he never gave up on his dream of a better life. In a reply on Japanese Twitter, he even expressed that no matter how difficult things got, he would keep trying to escape his situation. This determination eventually led him to seek out gold and taking whatever it takes to be rich, but we'll get into that later. Unfortunately, not everyone saw Norton's hard work in a positive light. In FG's deduction quest, his co-workers looked down on him, calling him a flatterer. Whether they were simply jealous of his determination or if Norton really tried to gain favor with higher-ups is unclear. Interestingly, there are indications within one of his costumes that support the latter interpretation. The description suggests that Norton felt compelled to act in a pleasing manner to maintain a positive image. His design notes even suggest that their behavior made him hate them and possibly seek revenge. Some fans believe he never actually intended to kill anyone by causing the mine explosion, at least not initially, although this remains a debated topic. In short, Norton's early life was full of struggles. No matter how hard he worked, nothing seemed to change. Poverty followed him everywhere. And despite doing everything he could, a comfortable life always seemed out of reach. Yet, he never stopped trying. Again and again, he fought to change his fate, even if the world refused to make it easy for him. Before he passed away, Norton's father was close friends with a fellow miner named Benny. According to Norton's fourth letter, both of them dreamed of mining gold instead of coal. Benny suggested they could mine gold somewhere else, where they wouldn't have to work only for the rich. However, it's unclear if Benny ever followed through with this plan, or if he reunited with Norton's father after, suggesting the idea in a letter. What we do know is that Norton's father passed away, leaving young Norton to fend for himself. There are several theories about what happened to Norton. We know that he started working in the mines at a very young age and had to wash dishes at night just to survive. As a miner, he worked so hard that it made others resent him. One theory suggests that Benny was among those who looked down on Norton. This idea comes from Norton's first deduction quest, which mentions the phrase, "Is it an olive branch you just threw?" In literature, throwing an olive branch is a symbol of peace, meaning someone wants to end a conflict and make amends. For this to appear in Norton's story, he must have had a conflict with someone that he wanted to resolve. Since Benny is the only major character mentioned in Norton's deduction quest, some fans believe that Norton had a falling out with him. Still, the reason for this conflict is a stretch in itself. Some speculate that Benny was a fellow miner who resented Norton's work ethic. Others think Benny might have played a role in Norton's father's death. These theories come from the Tea House Tales and the Golden Rose Theater event, but the clues supporting them are vague. Another theory suggests that Benny actually cared deeply for Norton. This idea comes from Norton's fourth letter, which describes Benny as a close friend of his father who also looked out for Norton. Benny even made a winter quilt for him, showing his concern for the boy's well-being. Whether Benny was an enemy or a protector is open to interpretation, as the story leaves room for different conclusions. Regardless of these theories, Norton's life was extremely difficult. From a young age, he had to understand how society worked, which shaped his personality. One of his costumes, Ant, reflects this reality. Losing his parents and being left alone made him a loner, which led him to be quiet, withdrawn, and unsociable. He had no friends, no one to care for him, and no time for anything but work. His harsh experiences in the mines, where owners treated him like a slave, and his co-workers envied him. Norton grew up in a world that followed the rule of survival of the fittest. This explains why he avoids forming relationships and why he focuses on his own well-being above all else, as it was the only way he could survive. Still, to keep his job and possibly change his fate, he had to stay on good terms with both the mine owners and those who disliked him. This would explain why, in his third deduction quest, he is said to have received many recommendation letters from his employers. It could also be why, in his latest letter, he is shown working as a volunteer at a hospice called the Refugee of Peace, perhaps as a way to maintain favor with others. The hospice was described as being in terrible condition, with overworked staff and sick people everywhere. Even those who passed away did not receive proper care. Their bodies were left in the dump for days. This was the case for Benny as well, which we will discuss later. Norton became a volunteer at the Refuge of Peace in order to be looked as a nice guy by everyone. There, he met Benny again, now old and bedridden. It's unclear how Norton discovered that Benny had a map of gold mines, but it suggested that he learned about it during his time at the hospice, perhaps through casual conversations. In Norton's sixth letter, Alice mentioned that he had been visiting the hospice for 3 years, initially as a volunteer. However, starting in the second year, his visits became more focused solely on Benny. It seems that during this period, Norton became obsessed with the story of the gold mines. Benny must have shared with Norton his old dream of mining gold with Norton's father. Realizing that his fate wouldn't change if he remained a miner, Norton became deeply invested in the story and fully absorbed in the idea. Benny had a map with 13 possible gold mine locations, which he had kept with him. If we refer to Norton's first letter, it appears that Benny had tried to mine gold in the past as he longed to return to the mines in search of it. If we follow the theory that Norton and Benny had a past conflict, it's possible that they reconciled at the hospice. Benny shared the story of the gold with Norton, but was hesitant to reveal more details. He was cautious. Having lived as a miner, he knew that trust was a rare commodity in a world full of competition. He needed someone he could fully rely on before sharing the location of the gold, or handing over the map, as he still wanted the gold for himself as well. Norton, blinded by his desperation to escape his miserable life, began scheming against Benny. To gain his trust, he started visiting Benny frequently, sometimes as often as 4 times a week. His goal was to make Benny open up and eventually reveal the locations of the gold mines. His efforts paid off when, one day, Benny finally shared the map he had been keeping. It seems that Norton convinced Benny by promising to take him out of the hospice and back to the mines, as hinted in his first letter. Despite this, Norton didn't completely cut ties with Benny. 6 months prior to leaving Benny altogether, Norton still visited him occasionally, though far less frequently than before. What had once been visits 4 times a week gradually dwindled to twice a month, then once a month until they stopped completely. To me, it seems these visits were merely to inform Benny that the locations marked on the map contained no gold at all. So, what really happened during that time? As soon as he obtained the map, Norton began his search in earnest. However, after excavating 12 out of the 13 marked locations, he found no gold. The exact locations of these mines remain unclear. At least for now, there seems to be no precise information about it. site Norton had yet to explore was the Golden Cave. This mine is strongly tied to Norton, appearing in official lore and artwork. However, conflicting accounts about the cave's history add complexity to the story. One version suggests that gold was indeed found there, as implied in the map's backstory, yet Norton's excavation yielded nothing. Alice de Ross's reports also state that there was never any gold in the mine at all. Regardless of whether gold ever existed in the Golden Cave, Norton believed it did. What is certain, however, is that the mine contained a meteorite. This is supported by Norton's backstory in a Famitsu article and his skill descriptions, which state that he took a piece of meteorite ore and fashioned it into a magnet. A theory stemming from Norton's sixth deduction quest suggests that an unidentified object was blocking the path inside the Golden Cave. According to speculation, this object was a meteorite that crashed into the mine. This has led some to believe that the mysterious green eye visible in the Golden Cave map belongs to a Lovecraftian entity known as Glaaki, a being said to have arrived on Earth via a meteorite. Fans have debated the meaning of this eye, with a popular theory proposing that it belongs to Glaaki. Glaaki, a creature from the Lovecraftian mythos, akin to Ithaqua, Hastur, and Yidra, is described as a monstrous, slug-like being covered in spines. It has a slimy, greenish appearance and exhibits malevolent intelligence, capable of controlling humans and turning them into its loyal servants. Interestingly, the creator of this fictional entity is named Ramsey Campbell, which bears a resemblance to Norton Campbell's name, perhaps fueling the theory's popularity. Returning to the obstacle in the mine, whatever it was, Norton needed it removed to explore deeper in search of gold. For this, he required explosives. Unable to obtain them on his own, he sought assistance from other miners. According to the Fool's Gold deduction quest, Norton bribed a warehouse officer with alcohol to acquire the explosives. Ultimately, Norton secured the explosives and ventured into the mine to clear the obstruction. The live-action trailer depicts him carefully placing the charges while being followed by a group of furious miners. These miners may have been those he had deceived with promises of gold, those who discovered his actions, or simply those who disliked him. Seeing no alternative, or perhaps driven by his own resentment, Norton detonated the explosives, causing the mine to collapse, trapping himself and several others inside. Norton's sixth deduction quest reveals that a geological report warned of the mine's fragile structure, stating that even a minor mistake could trigger a collapse. It seems that Norton miscalculated, resulting in disaster. The explosion burned his face, but he survived. Given his past hardships, Norton was not one to surrender easily. After regaining consciousness, he realized that there was no gold, or that any chance of retrieving it had been lost due to the collapse. Instead of continuing his futile search, he took a chunk of the meteorite and began his escape. His third letter states that he dug his way out. Whether this should be taken literally or figuratively is unclear, as tunneling out of a collapsed mine would be extremely dangerous. More plausibly, he may have navigated through existing shafts that connected the mine to the surface. It took him 2 days to reach safety. Upon emerging, he was immediately spotted by a rescue team and received medical treatment. According to his third letter, he was the sole survivor. Following his recovery, the people never brought up the incident, offering only empty words of comfort before abandoning him. Norton, too, remained silent on the matter, growing gloomier than ever. All he did was shaping the meteorite chunk he took from the mine into a magnet. The incident in the mine happened in around 1901, or 1 year before Ashes of Memory, and it seemingly shaped Norton's mind. According to the Famitsu article, Norton gave up being a miner and became a prospector instead. Similarly, Norton's deduction quest states that he abandoned work in the mines to become a geological surveyor, likely to avoid ever entering a mine again. For those unfamiliar, a prospector, or geological prospector, is a professional who searches for valuable minerals such as gold, silver, and diamonds. Prospectors explore areas believed to contain mineral deposits and use various techniques such as geologic mapping and geophysical surveys to locate these resources. At some point, Norton received news of Benny's death. It is unclear whether this happened after the mine incident or sometime before. In his 6th letter, Norton was described as looking gloomy when visiting Benny's corpse, though not in the way a grieving family member would. Before leaving, Norton placed 2 copper pennies on Benny's eyelids, a customary practice in the Victorian era. However, another miner took these pennies, and Alice later noticed that they were not British or French currency, but rather para, a form of currency commonly used in Eastern Europe at the time. Afterward, Norton continued working as a prospector, using the magnet he had created. However, despite leaving the mines, he did not abandon his dream of becoming rich and living a better life. As stated in the Famitsu article, this suggests that even as a geological prospector, his circumstances did not improve significantly. Norton's life remained largely unchanged after the mine incident. Around 1 year later, he received a commission to eliminate a certain arrogant, wealthy lady in exchange for a substantial sum of money. This commission was likely orchestrated by Orpheus, as part of a ploy to lure Norton into the manor game. However, some theories suggest that the commission came from other sources, such as Count Barrière or Wilhelm Lamb, and that Norton merely happened to find the target at the manor. Personally, I believe Orpheus was behind it, though the exact reason remains unclear. Interestingly, even though Norton had never met Orpheus, he was familiar with him through the novel Orpheus wrote, as stated in the Orfeo event. Tempted by the promise of wealth, Norton accepted the commission, ultimately leading to his participation in the manor game known as the final game, The Ashes of Memory. That's all I have gathered about Norton's backstory. In my opinion, his lore is one of the most extensive, as it ties directly into Orpheus and Alice, the central figures of the story. If I missed any key details, feel free to add them. This is your broadcaster, Silmina, signing off.